Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. This is episode 66. I am one of your hosts, Alec. My pronouns are he, him, and we have a very special guest today. So please welcome Andrew, also known as MTG Muddstah. Welcome to the Faerie Conclave.
Hey, my name is Andrew. My pronouns are he, him, and like Alec said, I do MTG Muddstah stuff.
Yeah, I have been very much looking forward to this episode because I've been watching your YouTube channel for years, I think, at this point.
It's been around for a while. Yeah, it started in I think over 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. I think the channel I made it a while ago, but I think I've only been actually doing videos since I think 2017. I guess actually it's been like 5 years. Oops.
I love it. Yeah. When we shouted out your channel on I can't remember which episode it was, but we did a community spotlight on you. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that your Commander gameplay videos they're just so smooth and very satisfying to watch. And yeah. And I think at least your channel is the first one I saw that had kind of like one person narrating everyone's thoughts and kind of like moving through the game just as a narrator, essentially. And I thought that was really cool at the time, and it kind of...
I mean, a lot of people misconstrue that my channel was the first to do it, and I don't want to... I'm not trying to correct people, but like there were people who I think did the groundwork for it, which was like there was gameplays by Clonehead, which unfortunately they've stopped doing games a long time ago, and there was I think it was called Top Deck Productions. Those are the two channels that I really enjoyed because what got me into content creation was when I'd have to commute to work when I was working in a post-production company. I'd take a bus and a metro, and the brevity of their videos were so appealing because it meant that like the 20-minute bus ride and the 20-minute metro ride, I could watch 2 games on my way to work and then 2 games on the way home, which isn't to say that I don't like long-form games, but just at that period in my life, that's what I was like really, really into. And so that's what kind of inspired me to sort of do the more short-form, abbreviated, abridged kind of gameplays.
Cool. Yeah, that's fantastic. I feel the same way. I always watch Commander gameplay videos when I'm doing dishes, and so that usually takes me 20 to 30 minutes. So it's perfect to just like have one game start to finish, and kind of get that full experience. So it's one of my favorite ways to enjoy Commander content. So thank you for making so much of it.
Thank you for watching it.
Yeah. And so we're going to be talking about one of Andrew's Commander decks today. But before we get into it, we want to do our community spotlight for the episode. So for today's episode, we're going to shout out the Elder Dragon Hijinks series, which is on Alias V's YouTube channel, and it's also hosted by Olivia Gobert-Hicks. And they have incredible, fantastic guests to fill the other 2 spots for Commander gameplay. And I've been really enjoying it lately. They have fantastic people on.
The chemistry they get going in the channel is really, really great, and the editing is really nicely done. And if people are interested, I think Alias V actually streams on Twitch as she's editing. So if you ever really want to get kind of like that behind the scenes look on stuff, you can check out her stream. And she does a great job of not only working and editing, but also engaging with her viewership, which I think is just insane how much effort and thought must go into that at any given time. I struggle talking to myself in a room by myself, and I can't even imagine like a couple hundred people watching me edit a game at the same time. So
yeah, that's amazing. So if you want to check any of that out, I'll include links to Elder Dragon Hijinks and Alias V's Twitch in the episode description below, so definitely check it out. I would also be nervous to do that, though. I think
could you imagine? Like, it's nuts.
And I only ever edit sound and voices, so adding visual editing to that as well, I think.
Yep.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's impressive. And I like this series a lot because it's filmed over Spell Table. So, so you can have like all kinds of guests from all over the world. And like you said, the chemistry is really fun to watch.
Yeah, she does Alias V does, both of them do a very good job of just keeping it light and friendly and fun. And like, even if you lose, you just kind of come away from the experience just being like, that was like a really nice way to spend a couple hours, just jamming some cards, playing with some friends, talking some smack, and then, just doing cool stuff. It's great.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what we're all here for, right? We're having a
Hmm.
good time with our friends, and making new friends along the way. So, okay, I think it is time that we get into it. So, yeah.
We could just sit here and talk about. I could promote so many different people and channels. I could be here like the
Ugh.
whole episode would just be me gushing over people that I like to talk to and watch.
Yeah, same. That's why we started the community spotlight on the episode. We were like, okay, at least like one person per episode. But when we were putting together, I have a spreadsheet where I track everyone we've talked about and everyone we want to talk about. And
Hmm.
just like putting that spreadsheet together, I was like, okay, I've got like 50
Yeah.
YouTube channels, podcasts, artists, yeah, all of these people. So, yeah, honestly, oh, I forgot to say, we do this because I think the Magic community is one of the best kind of. I want to say kingdom. That's not the right word. Just kind of like a community, I guess. It's just one of the
Yeah.
best, I think, and has so many really cool and yeah, awesome people who make fantastic content. Okay, yeah, that's enough of that. I think it's let's talk about a commander deck. So yeah, we love
Yeah.
to talk about people's commander decks and get kind of the deep dive on their experience with it, and it's something that everyone loves to do. You kind of put yourself into your commander decks when you build them.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, first question for you, Andrew. Who is your commander we'll be talking about today?
The commander I chose to talk about today is one a lot of people know, and it's Mistform Ultimus, which originally was Mistform Ultimus, then became Orvar, but has since reverted back to Mistform Ultimus.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
And
really
so,
excited for this.
yeah, it's been a learning experience because blue is probably my least favorite color in Magic. I don't like counterspells. I don't like bouncing. Um, I'm a Jund boy at heart. Grosh has been always my thing, and when I first really got into Standard a long time ago, it was just at the end of Innistrad and then the Return to Ravnica block, and I played Jund with like Liliana of the Veil, Garruk Primal Hunter, Bonfire of the
Mm,
Damned, just like all kinds of fun like dragony sacrifice attack kind of stuff. So that's my comfort zone, and I realized when I was making videos and stuff like that that people wanted more variety from my like I'd play Krenko, I'd play like Gruul, I'd play Jund, I'd play everything but blue, and people wanted me to play a blue deck. So I built Mistform under the guise of building a blue deck, but trying to abstain from the things that I don't like blue decks doing.
gotcha.
And so it became more of a combat focused deck as opposed to a control based deck.
I really like that. I think that every player has their preferred strategy, and sometimes those line up with the colors, but other times they
Hmm.
don't. So, yeah, I think kind of taking a color you wouldn't normally play, but kind of changing it so that you're playing, cards that fit the style that you like. I think that's a really good way to build new
Yeah.
decks.
Exactly. It's expanding my comfort zone while at the same time still being true to what I enjoy about Magic, which is kind of combo or combat while I avoid stacks and hard control kind of thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I also love that you were kind of pushed to build this deck um, because of content creation. That's definitely something. I recently built a mono white deck, which
Mhm.
uh, before I started making this podcast, I never would have done that just because it
Yeah,
didn't. Yeah, same things you were saying about blue. But yeah, now that I have a mono white deck, I actually love it. So
nice.
it's funny how that happens. Okay, so yeah, and thank you for talking about kind of what inspired you to build this deck. And you mentioned switching it to Orvar and back. Could you talk a little bit
Mm.
more about the deck's history and what changes it's gone through?
Yeah, so like the principal nature of Mistform is the idea that basically I want to play as many Lord type creature types as I can,
Mm,
and so that includes like you have to pick and choose because unfortunately there's a lot of lords and you can't just run 99 lords and then Mistform obviously. So you gotta kind of like
gotcha.
scale things down, focus on a couple key tribes, and then just kind of uh, go from there. And when Orvar came out, the idea of having a commander who's functionally the same in terms of cost and power and toughness, because both of them are 4, with 3 is colorless and 1 blue, and then 3 threes, seemed fantastic, especially when it had upside of basically being able to make tokens of those commanders. But what I found happened was, as I was changing Mistform into Orvar, because Orvar requires such specific types of cards, like typically you need instants and sorceries that target in order for Orvar's ability to trigger, the elements that I loved about Mistform started to get cut, and the deck itself became a bit more watered down, and the end result was I wasn't playing Orvar very well, and I wasn't playing my Mistform deck really anymore. And I just kind of sat there after like 4 or 5 games of trying to make this work, and I was like, why am I doing this? This isn't really what I want to do. And so I've since switched out Mistform into, like, I switched out Orvar for Mistform again, but I have included Orvar in the 99.
Okay.
And I do have a couple instants and sorceries that target, because there were some to begin with in the deck anyway, but it's no longer the focus of the deck. And it's just kind of gone back to being what I enjoyed about it, which is kind of just combat-centric blue with a lot of lords, a lot of kind of weird interactions that don't necessarily always come up, and just kind of fun stuff that really makes me kind of like, there are different lines in the deck that make me kind of like smile when I get to be able to do them.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Just scrolling through the deck list, it is a very unique. Just the set of creatures going on here are very unique to this type of deck, and yeah, I think it's really cool, and it's also kind of an interesting like psychological thing where Orvar is functionally the same but with this extra ability added on, but just having that extra ability, even though it's an addition, kind of feels like it takes away because you are like pulled into having to like satisfy these conditions. So
yeah, I mean, like sometimes having more isn't necessarily better for what you're trying to do, and it depends on the mindset of what you're trying to do with the game. I think Orvar is a great commander. I think I've seen a lot of decks that build him or build them, I guess, because it's a shapeshifter, in such a way that you can really capitalize on the token ability. But for me, the issue was just like, okay, cool, I'm going to make a Lord of Atlantis. Okay, I'm going to make another Lord of Atlantis. And it was just kind of like, do I really need this to win? Like, it's an extra +2/+2 to Mistform, and to the other Lords of Atlantis really going to push the deck to be what I want? Or is it better for me to run like some odd, like Narumeha, or like who pumps wizards, or Scion is the fairy one that gives things shroud and stuff like that. There's just like reasons to run different cards, and I found that I lost sight of that as a result of changing it, and just there's no shade thrown against people who want to play Orvar instead of Mistform, but just for me, for my personal taste and enjoyment, the result was a severe lack of enjoyment changing to Orvar. Whereas with Mistform, even if I lose nowadays, it's just like, this is fun. This is what I want to do. This is kind of silly.
Yeah, I think that's really important to kind of just keep the core of why you first built the deck and why you enjoy it to and keep that and not change it. And so I have an Orvar deck, but I specifically built it like with Orvar in mind, and because I like the tricksy like instant speed making tokens of things, but it is a completely different strategy than a creature-based like Lords and Mistform Ultimus type of strategy. Exactly. Cool. That's I think there's a really good lesson out there for a lot of different commanders. Something that I know a lot of people get worried about is if a new commander comes out, and a specific example I'm thinking of is Go Shintai, the new Shrines commander, that is like specifically for the strategy that maybe you've been using another commander for previously. And so then you kind of have a decision, like, do you switch commanders over to this new one that just came out that might be better? And I think the answer isn't always yes. Like, you should, if you like the deck and you like playing it, there's not like no one's making you change to the new commander. So yeah, I think that's a great lesson.
Stick to your guns, stick to what you enjoy, be comfortable playing things that you might realize are not optimal or as good as they could be, and just be okay with that, I think, is a lot of it. And
Yeah.
it's, I think you just, without those expectations of always having to play the best and be the best, you can just have a lot more fun with the game and with your friends.
Yes, I totally agree. I think, yeah, I'm glad that we could get into that a little bit. That's a really good topic to discuss. Yeah, okay. And so, as far as Mistform Ultimus goes, what is your favorite part about playing this deck? Like, what gets you coming back each time?
I think people's reaction to the deck, because I mean, like typically you'll sit
Mm,
down at the table. I don't know how in your meta they do it, but we'll all sit down and we'll all say, okay, well, we're looking for this kind of game. Probably 45 minutes to an hour is usually what I try and ask for, just in the sense that it results in the best for filming and also my enjoyment. Anything over feels kind
yeah,
of like not a waste of time, but I just feel like I'm wondering. I'm like, okay, we could play another game. We could play another game at this point, or like
yeah,
this game should be over by now. And so for me, the part that I like is when we all put our commanders down and then reveal them. Um, People were like Mistform, like what the heck does that card do? And they look at it, and like the only relevant wording on it is that this creature is all types except for wall. And so like Mistform's claim to fame is literally not being a wall. That's the only thing
right.
he has going for it. And people were like, "What?" And it's just like this dismissive or intrigue that comes as a result of this reveal is usually what kind of like, I don't want to say gets me going because that seems kind of inappropriate, but like it's the part that kind of like it makes me like, I'm like, I want to show people what the deck can do. And then ideally by the end of it, even if I lost, they're like, wow, I never saw like a card like that, or I never thought a deck could be like that. And that for me is really what helps make the deck enjoyable in terms of replayability, and why I keep working on it and tinkering with it and just bringing it back and over again.
I think that's fantastic. It's just such a charming commander. When you look at it with the original printing, I just love the
Hmm.
line, "Mistform Ultimus may attack as though it weren't a wall."
Exactly. Like, well, it's like, thanks, great.
I think it's so funny. And yeah, so there's just so much to love about this commander. And yeah, I think I would have the same reaction. I'd be like, "What is this? I've never seen it, and I'm excited to see what is going on here."
Yeah.
I love it. Let's get into it. So this question, people listening might have realized this has changed a little bit, but we used to ask how the deck wins that we're talking about.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
uh, a question I kind of more prefer is, what are the goals of this deck? Because I think sometimes the goal isn't always
Winning.
to
My goal is
win.
winning. My goal is winning.
Okay,
Always
all right,
winning.
perfect.
No.
So
But like, I mean, like we've been talking about, kind of just like doing cool stuff is obviously the forefront of what I want to do with anything.
mm,
But I mean, ideally the deck will win through combat. That for me is what I want to do with a mono blue deck, just because it seems very out of character. But there are
yeah,
combos in the deck. Like I do run Mind Over Matter and a Zombie just as a way to close out a game, basically, if combat is not a viable option, either due to board states being too large or not having enough creatures anymore. If a game goes long, it's great to kind of have that silver bullet in the back of your pocket, knowing that, okay, if I draw into
yeah.
this and this, at least I can close out the game if I fight through it. So for the most part, yeah, it's really it's combat first, combo second.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that lends itself to the 45 minutes to an hour kind of
Hmm.
aim for the game, is to, yeah, have a combo or two just in case
Yep.
you need to put it together and end the game. So,
That's it. And like
cool.
mono blue is notoriously not great at comboing up specific cards outside of instants and sorceries. So
Right.
having to find Mind Over Matter and a zombie is typically just going to be random luck in terms of how much draw I've got going. And so I just kind of have to either get there with combat or hope that I draw into it, basically. So it's very much up to chance.
I like that too. Yeah, I think that's totally. I don't know really what fair means, but it
Hmm.
feels maybe more fair to kind of rely on the heart of the cards to get your combo
Yeah,
pieces.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
meant, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be kind of thing. And that's why, like, if someone counters it, You can't be upset about it. Like that's how it is. They were ready for it, or they had a piece of removal for it, and
Yeah,
that's fine.
sweet. I like it. Yeah, and I'm also kind of looking through some of the combat-focused creatures here, and I love to see Shifting Sliver, which
Hmm.
is sweet. Slivers can't be blocked except by slivers.
Yep,
So yeah, I think it's funny to have some cards like that. Uh, it's not a slivers deck, but it also is a
exactly. But it
slivers
still
deck.
has slivers, and Mistform is a sliver, and
Yeah,
it's just like okay, cool.
yeah, and that's kind of one of the things I love about Commander is that sliver card wasn't designed with the intention of like getting all of your random
Mhm.
changelings and things through as well as slivers. So yeah, just kind of putting these pieces together to create these synergies, I think is really cool.
Exactly.
So okay, now that we've talked about kind of the game plan for the deck, what are some of this deck's weaknesses that you have kind of run into in games, and then maybe some ways you've found to help mitigate those weaknesses?
So for the most part, the deck, because it is a combat-centric deck, it relies heavily on creatures. So the very few counterspells that I do have are often saved or kept in reserve for
Mm,
board wipes or targeted or mass exile, because it's so hard to recover if you've built up this like army of lords and all of a sudden you lose like four or five of them. Mistform
yeah,
suddenly does not do as well as it should. And so in order to maintain that, there does need to be, despite not being a control deck, there does need to be an element of control to it. So to mitigate that, I've often found blue is not particularly good at recursion from the graveyard, again, for anything other than instants and sorceries. So I've
yeah,
had to include stuff like Elixir Immortality to shuffle my graveyard back into my library in case I get milled out, as well as Sword of Light and Shadow, which provides Mistform with valuable protection, which first and foremost, white and black has phenomenal spot removal, so obviously this one sword is great for dealing with that. But also, if it connects, I get to return one creature card from my graveyard to my hand, so that means I can bring back one of those valuable lords that I may have lost earlier.
I like it. I when I was looking through the deck, the Sword of Light and Shadow definitely popped out to me because
Mhm.
I think that's a really clever inclusion for a mono blue deck, and
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's proven its worth. There are lines of thought that I've had where I want to include the rest of the swords of X and Y, but again, it comes down to what am I trying to do with the deck, which in this case, not a particularly strong, aggressive, like or expensive deck. So bringing in like Feast and Famine, Fire and Ice,
yeah.
War and Peace, while certainly would probably help power up the deck a little bit, will probably result in me having to cut some of my pet cards, which is not really what I want to do at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think maintaining your pet cards is a top priority
Hmm.
for me as well. And one thing I found is I had a deck for a while that I wanted to play as many of the swords of X and Y that I could,
Hmm.
just because I thought that was kind of a cool idea. But the thing that I found was the equip 2 on all of these swords actually becomes kind of clunky if you have 3 or 4 or more swords out on the
Yep.
battlefield. So
Yep.
yeah, I actually think that having just one, maybe two swords in a deck is probably uh, like good enough. Otherwise, you get too much of a good thing, if that makes sense.
That's true. I mean, like, and that's why, I mean, one of the inclusions, well, not particularly strong in this deck, but still something I wanted to run was the Grand Architect, which is the other blue creatures get +1/+1. But
Mm.
the critical element of it is that you can tap blue creatures to make two colorless mana that can only be used for artifact spells or abilities.
Ooh, okay.
So I never really want to attack with the lords to begin with anyway. Most of the time, they just sit back and pump up other things that then get sent into battle. So tapping the lords to help pay for equipment cost or to cast the equipment has been really, really kind of fun. And it also is a nice outlet to get around stuff like goad. Because if I'm forced to attack
Oh,
and make really bad attacks into blocks that people are waiting for, blocks that people are waiting for, basically, um, I don't really want to do that. So having a tap on command is nice to have.
yeah. I think that's a really cool way to yeah, to kind of protect yourself from those things.
Hmm.
And yeah, and small rant I'll go on for this episode. I recently saw on Gavin Verhey's YouTube channel, Good Morning Magic, that they made Goad an evergreen mechanic for multiplayer formats.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's pretty big news. They don't often set mechanics up to be released on new cards that often. So yeah, I think my thing on that is that I do like Goad, but similar to what we were talking about with the swords, I think some decks that have too much Goad can be a little bit of an unfun environment sometimes, especially when they're playing against decks like this one where you're attacking with maybe fewer, more important creatures. It kind of, it takes away that choice of your combats, which, here and there I think it's great. Like Disrupt Decorum is the Goad, like red Goad, quote-unquote board wipe, where everything has Goad for a round. And I love that card. I think that card is really fun. But just be careful if you're putting all these new Goad cards into your decks to not go overboard on them.
Yeah. Or play them against Alec.
Yeah, exactly. Please. Okay, so the next question we've got for you is, are there any notable cards in here that you'd like to shout out that fill maybe the more generic roles of a commander deck?
I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but two cards that I guess I would probably love to highlight for the most part are Quicksilver Fountain, which is an obnoxious card and a real pain in the butt to track and keep in mind. But basically, it turns, you get on each player's upkeep, they have to put a counter onto one of their lands that isn't an island specifically, and when they do, that land is just an island, just like full stop, just like that shuts off Gaia's Cradle. It is now an island. Enjoy. So this works in tandem with the Merfolk Lords because they give island walk. So obviously having a way to make islands on the repeat instead of having to run something like Spreading Seas is fantastic. But in the same vein, having to keep track of all that kind of stuff can be a real nuisance. So it's one of the cards that I'm always on the fence about where I want to potentially cut because it's just, does it lead to a funner gameplay experience? That is up in the air, basically. So that's basically, I would say that's probably the card I would highlight the most as, like, it fills a very good need for the deck, but at the same time, do I really want to play this? So
yeah, it's kind of funny. A few episodes ago, we interviewed another player in my playgroup who has a Jalira deck that is based around like sea monsters, and a lot of the large sea monsters also have island walk. So yeah, he plays Quicksilver Fountain in that deck as well, and we've had some absolutely hilarious games where you would think once per turn turning a land into an island isn't like it shouldn't be enough to disrupt your mana that much, but then when you actually are in a game playing against this, it's very disruptive. It's sometimes really hard to play around your lands slowly turning into islands.
Exactly. And it's just, it shuts off powerful abilities. Obviously the players get to pick, but like eventually they're going to run out of lands that they can target. So it's a death by 1,000 cuts, essentially.
Yeah, I remember playing against it with a 5-color deck and seeing my like rainbow lands and my 3-color lands slowly turn into just blue lands was devastating.
Yeah, and frustrating too, which is part of the reason why it's kind of like, is this really what I want to be doing? But it's proven its worth time and time again.
That's fair. Yeah, and it is kind of matchup dependent. So yeah, maybe that's something that if you draw it in your opening hand and you kind of look around, you're like, maybe this isn't something I want this game, and you can mulligan or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a really fun. It's like both a fun and also a not fun card in different situations, but I like to talk about it. Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions. Do you have pet cards in this deck, and which ones are they?
So that was a good question. I think first and foremost, Griffin Canyon is one of the pet cards in the deck. It's just this weird Visions land that all it does is it untaps a Griffin, and the Griffin gets +1/+1. But I mean, for Mistform, it's a reliable way to pump it. or in the absolute worst case, you can, if you let's say have a zombie out or a patron wizard or a Guildcaster Colossus, you can tap Mistform to do one of those three abilities, and then untap it with the Canyon, and then do it again or do a different ability. So
Wow.
there's like a lot of versatility on one land, basically.
I love this card. I forgot about its existence, but these cards that are just this random creature type, Griffin, I think that's incredible. That's such a fun card, and the art is also amazing.
It's just a weird looking card, and it's I don't know. I'm never unhappy to draw it, and
Yeah.
it's just it makes me smile. It's a fun land. It's not particularly overpowered. I'm surprised how expensive it is, but I'm pretty sure that's just the case with any kind of card from Visions or before. Basically, anything old now seems to have a pretty big price tag.
Yeah, yeah. I think they should reprint this if it's not on the reserve list. I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure. In like a jumpstart or something, like
hmm
a Griffin's jumpstart pack would be
hmm
amazing. So yeah, I love this, and that's kind of one of the things that brings me a lot of joy in Commander is finding these very old cards that like have no relation to like the new Commander you're building, but that
Yeah.
synergize perfectly. I think that's the best.
And they're just odd. Like it's just these
Hmm.
odd when they were designing things initially, not like you said, giving kind of any real thought to Commander as a format because that didn't even exist at the time, but just fun kind of magic effects from the past, and
Yeah.
it's just great. It's a neat piece of history. It functions well, so like I really don't know what else you can ask for.
Yeah, I totally agree. Similarly, one of the cards that I kind of like in this deck, but also don't like because the art creeps me out, is
Okay,
Patron Wizard.
okay, it
Um,
creeps you out.
just a little bit. There's something about it, but I
It's
like
very
this
it's
card a
very like
lot.
realistic looking, but yeah, it's I feel like I don't know. There's an actor I'm sure looks kind of like that. I can't think of a name or who it is, but
Mm.
it's just the way it's presented. It looks like it's kind of like Malcolm McDowell looking dude.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
So
Kind of unsettling and
yeah,
something about that. But it's another card that is kind of from that same era where like accidentally creates a lot of combos, which I think
yep,
is really fun to mess with.
mhm,
Oh yeah, and this one is blue, blue, blue for a 2/2, which
yeah,
amazing, incredible. Uh,
yeah. And you tap a wizard to make basically your opponent pay one colorless, otherwise the spell's countered,
yep.
and they don't have to have haste. I mean, you just tap a wizard, an untapped wizard you control, and it just happens. So it's really powerful the turn it comes down because it can tap itself for its own ability, and every
Oh,
subsequent wizard that comes out is that much more valuable.
okay. I like that. Yeah, and you've got a ton of wizards in here.
Oh yeah, I would say the two main tribes of this deck, probably wizards first, followed closely by merfolk, which also happens to have a fairly high number of wizards in it. So it synergizes very well with everything basically I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's great. So if you're playing Maskwood Nexus, is wizards maybe the
Oh yeah.
most frequent one that you choose?
Maskwood Nexus is great. Arcane Adaptation, very similar, very powerful. So basically, Wizards is the first choice with Arcane Adaptation, followed quickly by Merfolk, followed thirdly by probably Slivers, just for the evasion that some of the creatures in this deck can grant. But Nexus is number one. If I have to find an artifact, it's almost
Mm.
always going to be Nexus.
Yeah, I think that's one of my most favorite recent cards that has had a
For
pretty big
sure.
impact on Commander as a format, just because uh, creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield, having every creature type just opens up so many strange possibilities
Mm.
for decks like this. That's awesome. So, what would you say is the one card that's kind of the MVP of the deck that you love to see in your opening hand?
Commander's Plate probably is the number one
Mm.
card I will always be happy to see on turn zero or when I draw my opener, just because I know it's coming out turn one, and the protection and versatility that it gives to Mistform first and foremost, but literally any other creature in the deck is incredible. Mostly because I'm playing mono blue deck, and so it grants protection from white, red, black, and green for, I think it's what's the cost to equip? It's 5 to equip, so obviously that's not cheap, but it's only 3 on your commander. So it's a very good protection card basically, while at the same time making it difficult to block and remove. So all that being said, it's a great card. Plus it gives +3/+3, which turns Mistform into a 6/6, which typically with my other lords usually means it's going to be a 2 or 3 connect, and you're done on commander damage.
I love it. Yeah, that combined with all of the cards that give evasion of some kind. Yeah, very, very potent. And yeah, and I really like Commander's Plate a lot too. I think I would love to see more cards that incentivize playing less colors in your Commander deck. And this is a perfect example of that type of card.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay, so while playing this deck, which I know you've played this deck a ton, what has been one of your favorite in-game moments that you've had while you played it?
I think there was a recent game where I played one of my, well, I won't call it local shop 'cause it's a bit far away now, but Wizard's Tower in Ottawa. And it was 3 tribal decks and a Terralf deck. There was a Tomer had come to town, budget commander, who does MTG Goldfish. And he was in town, so we went to the shop to play a game. He was playing his tribal deck, which is the Ur-Dragon, but with like a heavy emphasis on shapeshifters and changelings. And there was an Edgar Markov deck. And the gentleman playing the Edgar Markov deck, true to form with Edgar Markov, it's very aggressive. Turn 2 like Vampire Nocturnus, which was just insane. And then just beat down after beat down after beat down. Took out the Terralf player after getting Coat of Arms and casting it, and he picked... Well, he didn't pick anything because it pumps everything based on stuff, but I cast, on my subsequent turn, Arcane Adaptation after having like 3 Master of Waves come out and stuff like that, thanks to clones, and I turned all of my creatures into vampires. And so like my horse elementals were just like 21/21s, and I just swung in, and he was at like 80 life or something like that, and I was just able to knock him out in 1 combat step, and it was deeply satisfying. No one was really expecting it. We thought we were in so much trouble because there's this vampire player with this massive board, tons of life. Neither of us had particularly huge board states, and it just got really out of control very quickly, which is just kind of what I like to do in general with EDH, where you go big or you go home kind of thing.
That is incredible. I've seen quite a few dangerous Coat of Arms being played.
Oh yes.
But against 2 decks that have shapeshifters in them, that's like, ooh, that is a risky card to play in that situation. That's awesome though. I think one other thing that brings me a lot of joy is taking down any Edgar Markov players. So
I mean, it has a bit of a reputation for being very aggressive and very good. So I can understand that entirely. But I mean, it depends on how the person built it. If it's like low curve, fast vampires that just kind of like overwhelm, that can be really hard to deal with just because you don't have enough time to sort of stop them. But depending on how they play it, it doesn't have to be as bad as some people have experienced. So
that's true. I do think if you're able to stabilize and play a board wipe, then then it's kind of like the typical aggro strategy where you can make them stumble quite a bit doing that. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've made it to the final question, and
final destination.
Yes, exactly. And I'm very interested. So for anyone out there who's interested in building a Mistform Ultimus deck, which is a very unique deck, what advice would you give them?
I would suggest basically play cards that you enjoy playing first and foremost. Don't fall into the trap of running every blue commander known to the Magic the Gathering community, because it doesn't make... You lose out on some stuff. I'd like to play clones quite a bit. There's a lot of value in changelings. Shapesharer is an incredible card that allows you to have tons of versatility because it can make any shapeshifter into a copy of something else until your next turn.
Ooh.
So, like, if you need to get in for those extra points of damage, you could turn Mistform into, I don't know, whatever you need it to be, really.
Yeah.
And you're not restricted to your own creatures as well. So there's just tons of versatility, and it's till your next turn as well, which is something I think a lot of people forget about. It's not until your end of turn, it's till your next turn. So there are ways where you can just kind of like shut down people's lands, or make it so like copy it to Faerie so that they can't cast at instant speed, and just like a lot of fun versatility which might be lost if you focus too much in one direction. So just like keep an open mind, play stuff that you like, and just enjoy doing blue things that aren't directly related to like control or stacks or kind of like controlling like control, like disallowing people from doing things that they want to do. Just kind of like roll with what they're doing, and in some ways with clones and stuff like that, maybe try and do what they're doing as well, or if not, do it a little bit better. So
yeah, I think that is one of my favorite things as well. In blue, I'll always include at least a Rite of Replication, if not a couple other Phyrexian metamorphs and things like that.
Exactly. Just some great, there's like a great axis of clones, and the beautiful thing about clones in EDH is they scale perfectly to the power level of the game. It's one of my favorite things is my buddy Trevor has a Yidris deck, which is basically everything but white, but he's built it in such a way that it is a clone or copy tribal deck. And so what he's going to play changes every game, which is in and of itself already very valuable, since you never get bored of the same lines over and over again, but it also scales to the pod. No one's ever going to accuse you of playing like a hyper aggressive clone deck, because the only thing you can clone are what they're playing. So if it's kind of like I just like the fact that you're going to always kind of have that inherent matchup with your opponents without even having to sort of discuss it ahead of time. It's just going to be a thing that happens with the deck, and it allows for just really kind of dynamic, changeable, like unrepeatable kind of games where you're really not too sure how it's going to go. Everything's going to be so dependent on what you draw or what they draw, and that's kind of exciting. It's that unknown element of the game that's really, really exemplified in that. So clones for me are really, really wonderful cards in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, especially if you are having a game with people who you haven't played with before, it's a perfect way to start out, to kind of get a feel for how they built their decks and things like that. Playing a deck like this that has clones and is better at scaling against your opponents.
Yeah, and if at the very worst, it's just doing more of what you want to do to begin with, which in my case is Lords. Like all of a sudden I play Lord of Atlantis. Cool. Next turn, I'll play a Phantasmal Image, copying Lord of Atlantis. Is it super powerful? No, but it's doing what I wanted the deck to do, which is play Lords and pump creatures. So it's a win-win for me.
I love it. Yeah, and it's true, too. I think I like how a lot of these cards you can target your own creatures, so there's always that kind of backup plan of, giving yourself more Lords and things like that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and I do think I have played against a couple decks that play more like steal your creatures type of effects rather than cloning them. And I think the difference might, like looking at the cards, it might not seem like those are very different, but gameplay wise, I think those are two very different things. And I much prefer the now I have a copy of your Ulamog type of play rather than.
I think everyone would agree at the end of the day that you copying what they have feels better than you stealing what they have. Because I think people, as much as they'll deny it, no one wants to have their best cards taken. You put those cards in the deck because you want to play them, and while I don't necessarily fault the person for taking them, oftentimes you can be kind of like, oh, well, that stinks. Like, I really want to cast that. Whereas this way they get to cast it, and then you get to cast it as well. And then everyone's happy. Everyone's winning.
Everyone's invited to the party, and we all get
exactly. Everyone's going to have a good time. And if you happen to do it and your Ulamog also happens to now be a merfolk all of a sudden with Island Walk, well, like that's better for you, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've had a fantastic time talking about this
Me
deck.
too. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Before we kind of wrap things up, are there any plugs you'd like to throw in for your content or anything else like that?
I mean, if you want to find me, you can check out Twitter. I'm basically all of my social medias is MTG Muddstah, so the stupid way that I named the channel. But basically, if you look on any platform, if it's there, usually it's me. I don't think I'm not super active on Facebook or Instagram, but they're definitely around. And yeah, just you can find me every Monday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, posted games.
I love it. That's perfect. And yeah, and we'll have links to all of those down in the episode description below. So yeah, definitely check out Andrew's work and content and all that stuff. Yeah, and if you want to get in touch with me or anyone else in the Faerie Conclave, we have a Discord, an Instagram, and a Twitter. And we're also currently, with the release of this episode, doing a giveaway on Twitter for
Nice.
a Boseiju, which is a pretty big big card lately. So
That's a good card.
yeah, very excited to give one of those away to someone on Twitter. And also a Renin 7, a borderless Renin 7. Excited about that too. So yeah, just
Some
check
good
those
hits.
out. Thank you. Yeah, we were like, these are 2 cards we want to give away, and they were both green, so we just decided to make it like a green giveaway situation. Yeah, okay. Well, I think that is all for today. So thank you all for joining us, and we will catch you all next time.